without further ado, we will jump right in. And we'll start with a quick intro as well. And so now it should be on the agenda screen. If anybody's seeing anything else, yeah, please just let me know, but I think we're all good. So what we're going to do today is first, I'm going to start with a presentation, which I'll call the marketer's presentation, kind of going a little bit over Google Analytics 4 or GA4 as we refer to it, kind of what the deal is with it, and then look into some of the reports and some of the things that as a marketer I go in and look at on a regular basis. Once that's done, we'll jump into some demos and question and answer, and Ryan will be leading that, assuming we can get his audio working. And then that will get a bit more technical and into some of the things that you can do in terms of the configurations. And then we will have slides and videos that will follow next week. So just by way as a bit of background as we get going, I started doing online marketing in 2001 for a software company that sold globally in 7 languages. And fortunately, at that time, you didn't actually need qualifications to get a job in digital marketing. So kind of lucky on that front. Very much like going to school, but nonetheless, that went really well and ended up running online sales and marketing for that company. Worked with a couple other startups, the final one being out of San Diego, and got some great experience. And then in 2007, launched Plus ROI Online Marketing. We sort of a unique situation in 2022. We came to have actually more clients outside of Canada than inside of Canada, which was an interesting benchmark. But we do, a lot of clients in the US and the Caribbean. And then, of course, we love to serve local Canadian clients as well. And for the last 7 years, we've been acknowledged as a Google Premier Partner, which means that Google considers us as being in the top 3% of Google agencies in the country. So as a small Victoria agency, we're pretty darn proud of that. Most of the other companies in that tier are pretty huge companies. And we absolutely are not. As well, last year, we incorporated a company called What Works Marketing to help small service businesses win more clients. A bit more of a streamlined option that's cost effective for folks that are marketing their services in their local market. And Ryan's also on the webinar with us today. He's been a partner in Plus ROI for something like 13 years now, and has been doing analytics, web development, and technical marketing for well over 15 years. Starting out doing SEO in China. And so jumping right into things, first off, to give a bit of background and why we're doing this, why this actually matters, is basically the internet has revolutionized marketing, but only if you use tools that allow you to track and measure results. And I'm constantly blown away by the size and number of companies that don't use these tools. Many of them are free tools. They're pretty straightforward. And Google Analytics in particular gives you a free and objective analysis of which marketing sources your traffic, leads, and customers are coming from. And so for any company that's spending money or time or effort on marketing, this seems pretty obvious and pretty critical that you'd be measuring where this comes from and understanding what activities are leading to gaining clients. But again, surprising amount of companies don't do that. You'll notice I mentioned objective in there as well. And the reason I mentioned that is because most of the social and advertising platforms, whether it's Pinterest, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, they all have their own pixels or tracking mechanisms that they offer for you to set up. Now, this is where it gets interesting, is that how the results are analyzed is quite subjective. So for instance, whether you're going to measure the first click as the source of the traffic or the most recent click has a lot of bearing on sort of what source the activity, what source a lead or customer is credited to. And to give an example, Facebook. If you're doing Facebook remarketing, Facebook is ridiculously generous for claiming customers as being driven by them. So this is where it's good to have a third-party thing to be able to look at this stuff. And we'll also be also be talking a little bit about attribution later. And essentially, if it's important for you to acquire customers on the web, you need analytics. There's just really no way around it. Looking at a bit of a history of analytics. So in 1995, a company called Urchin was founded that built what is essentially the present day Google Universal Analytics. Google bought it and then rebranded it as Google Analytics in 2005. And at this point, there's tens of millions of Google Analytics accounts in use. This includes millions of abandoned and dormant accounts and just a huge data mess for Google, which I suspect has a little bit to do with their approach to the new analytics. And then, of course, in October of 2020, Google announced the launch of Google Analytics 4, and they announced the sunsetting of Universal Analytics for July of 2023. Now, I kind of hope and suspect that they will give a little bit more of a grace period once July comes, because certainly not everybody has migrated at this point. I do lean towards expecting that to happen, although I certainly wouldn't count on it. At this point, most of the companies that haven't quite migrated are probably going to lose a little bit of data at the start of, or risk losing a little bit of data at the start of July. Not the end of the world, although certainly in a perfect situation, this would be all in place at this point. So it was interesting too in preparing some information about GA4 and looking at the other related properties. It becomes clear that GA4 is certainly not operating in isolation. There's a whole family of products that relate to this. So, for instance, there's Google Search Console. Actually, recently wrote a blog post about Google Search Console on the Plus ROI website. You can share a link with that later if anybody's interested. That allows you to actually see your performance directly in Google Search as reported by Google. So you can see Google, what Google thinks and knows is happening with your property in search. It also shows the health status of your website and points out any issues you might be having. And almost nobody uses it. So it's a ridiculously powerful tool. It's worth looking at. Google Tag Manager is another tool that is very handy. For instance, I mentioned all those tags and things from multiple social platforms and advertising platforms. You can actually implement those without code. So marketers like myself that are willing to learn just a little bit about it can quickly implement third-party tags through the tag manager without having to code anything, which is awesome. It's also a great way of avoiding duplication of tags and that sort of thing, which we see all the time. And then also Google Tag Manager allows you to create more sophisticated goals for tracking. There are certain goals that can't be tracked just by Google Analytics for certain activities on your website that might not be able to be tracked by Google Analytics 4, but with the incorporation of Tag Manager, you can do that. There's also Google Looker Studio, formerly known as Google Data Studio, which is basically a dashboard tool that allows you to create visual representations of your data from multiple sources. Interestingly, one good thing about Google Analytics 4 is it has added the ability to create custom reports and dashboards within it. So actually, the Data Studio or Looker may not be quite as in demand as it previously was. There's Google Ads, which of course isn't specifically an analytics platform, but you can now, and actually you always could, but you can set up conversion goals directly through Google Ads, which in some cases now may be more advantageous than using the Google Analytics goals, which gets a bit confusing. And before GA4, we had come to rely exclusively on Google Analytics goals. And we'll talk a bit more about goals and tracking, those sort of things later. There's the Google Merchant Center, which if you sell things online, the Google Merchant Center allows you to populate shopping ads, which I'll quickly jump to a view of shopping ads. So for instance, if I Google mountain bike shoes, these images that appear across the top with the pricing and titles of direct links, those are through Google Shopping. But what a lot of folks don't actually understand is that if you do have a store, if you do sell things online, if Google doesn't have much in the way of ad inventory for the category that somebody's searching for, you can actually get free impressions if your products are showing up in the Google Merchant Center. As well, there's the Google Business Profile, which is ridiculously important. And just have a quick look. Here's an example over on the right here. We can see an example of a local company, Maple Leaf Adventures. I always use them as an example because they have such a ridiculously well fleshed out Google Business Profile. It has all their social profiles in there. It's got reviews. It's got question and answers. And in having the Google Business Profile set up, your company is going to be quite a bit more prominent. And this relates even to companies that aren't specifically local companies. It's definitely a big help for your brand search, and also gives you a bunch of additional data around how often you showed up in search, how many clicks you got through your profile, how many calls. It even tracks visitors to your location if you have a physical location. And then lastly, in terms of this whole family I'm talking about, there are what we call UTM conventions, which is going back to Urchin from 1995. It actually is short for Urchin Tracking Mechanism, is what UTM stands for. It basically allows you to add just a little bit of information to your links so that when you post links to different locations, like for instance, LinkedIn or Facebook or in a newsletter, you can actually add just a little bit to a link, and Google Analytics will automatically know what source it came from. It'll share the medium in reporting, and it'll even share the campaign in analytics. So you can see if you're into doing just the tiniest bit of work when you're doing promotions, you can actually see exactly which sources automatically, you can see which sources brought traffic in your Google Analytics. And super, super valuable if you have just a little bit of time and discipline to do that. So there's no way around it. Google Analytics 4 is painful. It's very painful. It's difficult, challenging. It's totally different than the old analytics. And so why is the question that comes up. And one of the biggest things is something we see with most Google products, is that they really take an engineering first approach. And I mean, I like Google as a company. I think they are a fairly responsible company as these things go. But typical with Google, they've got a lot of super smart people who approach something, and then whether it's documentation or products, they set it up in a manner that is entirely logical to them. So we've got a bunch of really smart people setting things up in a way that makes sense for them. Often doesn't make a lot of sense for mere mortals like myself. And I don't know if you've ever tried to use Google's support documentation for anything, but it's pretty unapproachable. I mean, it's all, again, very logical. It's all there, but yeah, so that would be my biggest thing with GA4 is just, it's overwhelming. I mean, I'm somebody that doesn't love to read instructions. I jump into GA4 and I'm lost. Like I usually kind of think, oh, a logically set out interface, you'll just be able to find what you're looking for and it will all make sense. Not the case with Google Analytics 4. I also feel like that in this, I think part of the reason they are fully breaking with the old analytics is, again, we're going in 1995. So they now have 28 years of legacy data that would just be, I can't imagine the burden of storing and maintaining this, because all the data is there forever. They're literally killing all that, and it will be going away. Again, I don't believe that it will disappear as of July 1st, but at some point that's going to be gone, which again, I think is a big reason they went to the whole new platform. And there's also a pressing need to address privacy. And I think Google's actually done a better job of that than some of the other big companies like Apple and Facebook, in that with the way Google has things set up, they know people's activities, but the people are still anonymous. So they don't know who the person is. They'll just track people knowing what activities they do. So that just adds an extra layer of privacy that that really helps on that front, and I think has led to some of why GA4 is the way it is. And it's funny, if you have an analytics account, you've probably been getting a bunch of emails with notifications and talking about automatic upgrades to GA4 and this sort of thing, asking you to start the process. These can be helpful, but they don't duplicate your conversion goals. And again, the conversion goals are the events that you want to see happen on your website. So like if somebody filling out a form to make an inquiry, somebody watching a video, somebody visiting over a certain number of pages, they don't automatically duplicate those conversion goals. And then any custom settings that you have set up don't get migrated. So if you have a remotely sophisticated setup, anything but just off the shelf, you're probably going to be missing some data. So this is where, yeah, we've got a little bit about it and jump in. So in terms of GA4, what are some of the notable things that was new is, again, from a privacy perspective, the platform doesn't rely on cookies anymore. Cookies and sessions were how Google used to measure things. Now it's basically based on events. So things that happen on the website, and these cookies are not filling up and following people around in their browsers anymore because Google's not using that for it. Also, it has no IP address tracking. This brings up the interesting technical question, which I can't answer, of how exactly is Google tracking people and knowing who's doing what and tracking repeat visits. And sadly, I can't answer that question for you, but Google has actually gotten much better at tracking across applications and different visits, as well as they now have better lifecycle tracking. And I guess to put it in context, Google now has 7 properties that have over 1 billion users on each of them. So basically, if you use Google Maps, Google will be tracking you. And so, I mean, I think of my situation. In particular, I've got an Android phone. I use Google Maps all the time. I use lots of Google products. I'm old and boring now, so I'm not particularly worried about privacy elements of that. So Google will be using all of that information to make inferences about what I'm interested in, what kind of businesses I go to, and they'll be using that to better, both that sort of information to both do better tracking, as well as if you're doing advertising, better targeting. And in fact, when you do a search, Google has something now like 70 million different signals that it might use to customize your search results in your advertising, which sounds just crazy, but that's where it's at. And lastly, what's new is that Google Analytics 4 is harder to navigate, but easier to customize. So from this perspective, I'd say it's a painful learning curve, but once you do get it set up properly, it may actually be better than universal analytics, and in some cases, again, removes the need for a third-party dashboard. So some of the big challenges, first off, it feels very unintuitive. I feel dumb when I go in there. I mean, I've been using it for about a year now, off and on. At Christmas, I actually paid for a course and did like 15 hours of study. I still jump in and I feel like I'm lost. So expect to quite possibly feel that way. And it's funny with Ryan, who's probably migrated at least 50, somewhere between 50 and 100 accounts, I would guess at this point, or properties. I know he's very sensitive about that it's still confusing. And in fact, even the paid trainer that whose content I accessed, same thing. And the reason for that is there are a ton of bugs. Things don't always work as you expect. There are issues with it. There are incomplete features. Now, these are accelerating and getting better, but still not there. There's some other things. And this is the area where I just gave up, with the former analytics, certainly not an expert, but I could set up most accounts, even with custom settings. Now with things like these conversion goals, you don't get instant validation on them. You have to set them up, wait for Google to gather information, and then see if they worked or not. So this is where someone like me, who would kind of stumble through things a little bit, I just don't have the patience, and quite frankly, I don't feel like it's that responsible for me to be doing it. So these delays are quite annoying. And another challenging and frustrating thing is that looking at multiple accounts, depending on some of the choices you make, Google Analytics 4 doesn't look the same for everybody, and it changes regularly. So with that said, yeah, as we jump into Ryan's part of the presentation in about 10 minutes, he'll cover some of the technical things and challenges. And with that said, I'm going to have a look and just show some examples of how to actually leverage Google Analytics 4. And so my first slide is actually from the old analytics. And just to share an example, because there's some good data in this one. This is the report that as a marketer wanting to understand what was happening online with a business, this is the first report that I would go to look at something, which is in analytics, looking at the source and medium. So in this example, this is actually a client anonymized it to remove any identity or anything private there. But so in their case, you can see looking at the Google as the source and the medium being cost per click. You can see the next one is Google, and then organic, which is basically your SEO traffic. You can see the number of users, how many of them are new, how many sessions occurred, what the bounce rate was of people arriving and then leaving after only looking at one page, the average number of pages per session, how long people spent on the site. And then this is where, when I'm talking about these conversion goals, this is what I'm referring to. So in this case, their most important conversion goal is somebody filling out the contact form, which is set up as a custom conversion goal. And that's what all their efforts are guided towards in doing work with them, is optimizing the number of these contact form submissions that they receive. So you can see by source and medium how many of the contact form submissions come in. So for instance, in the Google cost per click, which is their ads, in this period of time, they had 374 form submissions from the Google ads, 100 from the Google organic or SEO, 58 from people that came directly from the website. And obviously, I go on, I don't need to, but then you can see things like LinkedIn, Facebook, and just get a real sense. Again, I believe this is the most important report there is. And now in Google Analytics 4, it's gotten a bit better in some ways and a little bit worse in some ways. So now, and again, I'll probably get lost and prove my point about feeling dumb in here, but what we're looking at here is a demo account that Google has set up that you can actually access through your own analytics account if you're curious to poke around an account that has some data. So go into reports, I'll get lost, there we go, we go into acquisition. And then one thing that's interesting is they've changed some of the naming and some of the conventions. So now you can look at users or the people that visited, or you can look at the sources of traffic. And there's sort of a subtle difference there. So in this case, it defaults to the total users by first source default channel. I actually prefer, again, and so you can see direct, organic search, paid, referrals. I actually prefer myself, again, to look at those source and medium. So we can look at the first user source and medium there. And then see, again, this is just sample data that Google's put down there, but you can see much of that same information I was showing on the other things. And these are individual users. If you click on traffic acquisition, it shows not the first source, and the first source is, of course, as an example, if I was shopping for a shirt and went to a website online, found it through organic search, and then went back later by going directly, the first user source would be Google search, and then the second source would be the, in that case, direct. Again, and with this, you can switch to, and this is where they're now naming it. This used to be called last click. They now call it session source and medium. So that is the way that people came to the website on their most recent visit. So the user acquisition shows the first source that brought people to the website. The traffic acquisition by default shows the most recent marketing or web source that brought somebody there. And we'll have a look at a bit of attribution in a few moments too. So having, did I just jump ahead? No, perfect. Geography and demographics data is another one that actually often look at that has gotten probably better, if anything. So if we go into, again, it's under the reports and user attributes, get a nice panel that shows users by country, city, gender, interests, age. And interestingly, Google is getting better and better at having accurate information around age and gender. And where, from my perspective, like 15 years ago, they would only have information on about 20 or 30% of visitors. Now they have typically accurate demographic information on more like 70 to 80% of visitors. And then as well, they use, they don't show the unknown anymore, but rather they extrapolate what they would feel that those visitors would be. If you click a bit deeper into demographic details, then you can pick, again, you can switch country to region, city, language. And then you can also, by clicking on this plus sign, if there's something else you want to look at, you can look at, let's look at country by the first user, source, and medium. So in that example, you can now break down where you're, in this case, your Google CPC, which is short for cost per click, what countries your Google advertising traffic is coming from, where your Google search traffic is coming from, and then again, any of the sources of traffic that you can measure quite closely there, especially if you use that UTM tracking I was talking about. Mobile technology, again, we can jump in there, and that's under the tech. Again, they have an overview, which gives you a good sense of platform, and they now track apps as well. So that's why 100% of the, in this case, it is just a website. So 100% of it comes through the web. They show operating system, mobile, desktop versus tablet. You can screen size. And these are all important things, particularly if you're designing for your visitors, knowing if people are coming mobile versus desktop, which of course, most companies have a majority of their traffic discovering them through mobile now. A few more business companies are a bit more sort of desktop still. And also screen size in terms of understanding what your responsive design should look like. You can jump into the tech details. And then basically, again, anything you want to find out about devices, browsers, screen sizes, you can find in here, which is critically important. Moving along, and then the next one, and one of the last ones, again, if I'm spending 15 minutes getting a sense of where a company's at and what's going on, this is one of the most important ones I'll look at, is the landing pages. And the landing page is just what it sounds like. It is what pages people are arriving at on your website. So in here, we go under lifecycle engagement. There's this landing page. And then what it's showing you is in whatever date range you have selected, it's showing you which pages people are arriving at. The blank is the home page. I don't know why Google has this not set in their demo data. We'll just kind of ignore that. But where it gets really valuable here as well is that you can then click on this landing page, and plus, again, you know what I'm going to look for here: source and medium. And then it actually shows the biggest sources that are bringing this traffic. So, and this is particularly important if you're doing blogging content marketing, is you can uncover it's like, okay, well, which pages, or if you're obviously interested in SEO, which pages are bringing traffic through the Google organic means? And that's where you can identify which pages search is driving a ton of traffic for. A ton of other details you can get into there, so I won't go too far into that and drag it out. And then the last thing I think that I'll touch on right now is, again, I mentioned attribution. And in this example, this is looking at the universal analytics window. And the reason I've done that It's just simply because I think they still presented a bit better in universal analytics. I want to explain what's happening in here and why looking at the model comparison tool is so valuable. So in this case, I mean, this is where it is in the old tool. And what we have is what I've got on this screen is we're comparing the last interaction that brought somebody to the website to the first interaction to a position-based one. And basically what that means is if you're just looking purely in analytics, it shows you what happened based on what the last click was that brought somebody to the website. So last interaction is how did somebody arrive at the website before they took whatever action they took. Whereas first interaction, the best way to describe that is how did somebody discover the website in the first place? And this is going to be really obvious why this is important, particularly, again, this is an anonymized bit of client data that I grabbed from a recent period. We're doing their advertising. So this is where it becomes incredibly important for us to know this, is the Google cost per click, which is the Google ads. From last interaction, it was the source of traffic for the last interaction for 19 conversions worth $10,400. However, if we look at, well, how did the buyers and people that converted on the website, how did they find the website in the first place? Oh, there was 34 conversions where Google cost per click was the source of the first visit to the website, and twice as much revenue in terms of $21,900 of sales. So it is, of course, a business decision how much emphasis you put on the different click. But to my way of thinking, the traffic source that started the journey and started the purchase process is by far the most important one. Google also there's a position-based model where it puts more emphasis on the first and last visit, but blends and breaks out the conversion across multiple clicks, however many multiple clicks there are to the site. So in GA4, pardon me, let me just jump over here. I have to go. This is where it gets confusing. It's like, okay, I want to see where my traffic came from and where. So it's under advertising. You click on advertising. Oh, there we go. Model comparison. And then in this case, it's showing last click versus data driven. And again, for my way of thinking, the most important things to consider are last click. And the most important one to compare it to me is always this first click. Like, how did somebody discover the website that led them on the purchase journey? And this is just sample data from Google. It has very minimal difference, but this is where in a real account, you will see some dramatic differences and some dramatic insights. And in that example, I was giving about Facebook being really generous with their own attribution. A great example would be, again, like if I go to shop for a shirt and perhaps I just go directly to the Bay online or something, find a shirt, send a link to my wife to make sure it's an approved shirt that I'm allowed to buy, because let me tell you, I've returned a lot of shirts over the years that I bought without any consultation. So I'll buy. Anyhow, after looking at the shirt, with Facebook, the companies that do remarketing on Facebook, if you see a product on a website, it's almost impossible for it not to show up in your Facebook feed. That happens almost instantly. So in that case, if I happen to look at lunchtime at a shirt on a website, happen to procrastinate after lunch and look at Facebook, and then go back and buy that shirt later in the day by going directly to the site, Facebook will actually show that, whether I clicked on the ad in Facebook or not, Facebook will show that as being the source of that sale. So again, that's where being able to look at the data in analytics like this for attribution is ridiculously important. And with that said, I promise to keep it to about a half hour before getting Ryan into the challenging technical stuff. Again, we probably expect some surprises as he jumps in. It is a bit, again, stuff changing in there. So we will jump in there in a moment. But first, a word from our sponsor, how we can help. In short, Plus ROI does all kinds of Google Ads management, SEO services. We help with aggressive multi-channel marketing efforts. Essentially, we help people measurably get more clients. So we take a very data-driven approach. We're not a branding agency. We are basically a performance agency that looks for the most direct way to get companies new clients. And of course, especially right now, we do have analytics support. I'll share that we're pretty much booked between now and July, but I suspect there'll be a lot of folks that don't get migrated by July. We love answering questions. I'm easy to find. My email address is rob@plusroi.com. Always happy to answer questions, and always happy to have just exploratory conversations and brainstorming sessions with anybody who's interested in learning more about web marketing for their company. And with that said, let's jump into the demo and questions. Again, so a couple quick caveats that there's no way we can cover everything in this session. Some of the things might be a little bit convoluted just with the way that GA4 is working right now, but and also for folks that are not looking for the technical intro, we certainly understand if you do drop off at some point when we're going through these examples. But what Ryan's going to carry on and have a look at is the tag installation, events, those ever important conversion goals that I was talking about. Have a look at audiences, which you can set up custom audiences and track them, which is super valuable. Also have a look at Google Ad conversions and any questions. We'll stay as long as needed to answer questions and do our best to answer them. And I know there probably will be questions that we can't answer off the top of our heads, but again, happy to follow up with anything that we can help with. So with that said, Ryan.
Hello, you can hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you. Okay, so let me turn off. I think you can take over your screen sharing.
Sure. I think you have to disable your screen sharing first. But yeah, as Rob mentioned, I'll kind of go through some of the technical stuff. Just this is probably, for some people, this might be beyond what you're ever going to be wanting to look at or hear about. Others who are trying to set this thing up, probably a lot of familiar issues and familiar steps. Some of it may be exactly what you're looking for. Other people maybe having done this might even say, oh, I did this completely in a different way. And that's one of the things that I'll mention is like a lot of this stuff with Google Analytics 4, there's multiple ways to do things. Sometimes even just setting up the tags, there's like 4 different ways you can set up your conversion. You can get the thing set up. And I think actually Google Analytics 4 seems to be working mostly, like as compared to a year ago when finding a lot of things were broken. Seems to be working, but I think where a lot of the issues are is for the past year, people have been kind of half setting it up or setting up in one way and then trying to do it another way. And sometimes those are conflicting. And so a lot of it sort of, those are some of the issues that you might come across. So yeah, I'll kind of go through this. If it's super technical and you want to jump off, I won't be offended. Yeah, and I'll kind of do my best. I obviously can't cover all the issues, and this will be sort of my approach to things as opposed to what some people may be doing. But maybe Rob, you want to give me a thumbs up if you can now see my analytics screen here. Okay, great. So first thing I'll just cover quickly is sort of how to get this thing set up to begin with. So most people probably have the old version of analytics already installed on their website. And they're probably, when they're logging into Google Analytics, they're getting big warnings with a countdown saying you got to migrate, and there's a big migration button. I've kind of given up on clicking the migration button because that takes you down a rabbit hole and doesn't always work properly. And oftentimes I'm just setting up a fresh new account and installing that. So where I'll be spending most of my time is kind of in this admin section here is where we're getting everything set up. And I'm looking at Plus ROI's admin section here in Google Analytics 4. And so the thing you got to do, again, this might be super basic for some people, but others it might be new ideas. You've got to basically get a little code snippet loaded onto every page on your website. And that will just track people's behavior around the website. And there's multiple ways to get that code on there. And I'm going to talk about Google Tag Manager, which is has always been around. It's super handy. Now it's almost standard. It's not required, but it's almost standard practice to use Google Tag Manager for Google Analytics 4 setups. So I'll go over that a little bit. But yeah, so when you set up an Analytics 4 thing, you'll have your account. You'll go into your admin section, you'll see your account, and you might have multiple websites or properties here. They're listed as properties here. In this case, we just have the one. But you can see that we've got several properties actually, but one Google Analytics 4, one for Plus ROI. And I'll just give you a quick look at under the data streams here. This is where all the data is coming into this data stream. You'll have, I want to show you just what the code actually looks like here. Although if you're using Tag Manager or any other way, you're probably not even going to need this code, but this is kind of if it was the most basic, simple implementation, you'd copy this piece of code and you put that on every page of your website. So that's kind of where that is. However, you might also install that. I'm going to show kind of using Google Tag Manager. There are plugins, like if you're using WordPress, I find this Google Site Kit plugin is working well. There's multiple other ways. If it's Shopify, there's a way to kind of all integrate that into the various websites. But mostly, in most cases, the one thing you really want to pay attention to is this little measurement ID code here. That starts with a capital G and then a dash. Google Analytics, the previous version of it, Universal Analytics, also had a little ID like this, and it starts with UA, and that's how you can tell the difference of which code is installed. The old one is UA, the new one has a little G, and then there's also a Google Tag Manager one that starts with GTM. And in most cases, at least for now, you'll have all of those on your site. So yeah, that's the main little bit of thing there. So I want to talk a bit about Tag Manager because that's kind of the way that that is sort of the standard. If you're looking for help and support, and you're going through documentation and seeing how people are setting things up, 90% of the time you're going to see people referencing Google Tag Manager because that's how they're doing it. And what Google Tag Manager is, Rob already talked a bit about it, but it's kind of like a container for all your codes, because you might have Facebook wants you to put some tracking code on your site, or LinkedIn or Hotjar or HubSpot, or they've all got little bits of tracking code that they want you to put on your site. So Tag Manager is like the one code that you put on your site, and then you can go into the Google Tag Manager interface, which is a cloud platform that anyone can log into, and just start saying, okay, I want to put analytics on there. I want to put Facebook. I want to put HubSpot, all that stuff. You can just kind of manage it all in one place. And you don't have to bug your webmaster to say, can you put these 50 different tracking codes on my site? So that's what Tag Manager is. We've been using it for forever, but now it seems it's Google Analytics 4 is really encouraging people to use it. This is what Tag Manager looks like. To get here, you just go to tagmanager.google.com or just Google it, Tag Manager, log in, and you'll end up with a little interface like this. The basics of it is, and there's lots of things in here, and you could spend months kind of in a course learning all the different things you can do with Tag Manager. It's really cool, but the very basics of it, you've got these things called tags, which are little bits of code, and then you've got triggers. And that's sort of the conditions for which we want to put a tag on a page. So you might, a trigger might be just all pages would be the basic thing. So anytime anyone visits a page, then fire a tag here. So to set up Google Tag Manager, set up Google Analytics 4 through Tag Manager, instead of copying and pasting that code on your site, or instead of using the like a Google Sitekit or Sitekit plugin or things like that, you would come into Tag Manager, you'd install your Tag Manager code. So under admin, you can grab that little Tag Manager code. And this is the thing that you'd want to send to your web developer here. This bit of code goes in one place and this bit of code goes in another place. And then the idea is after you've got that installed, you don't need to bug them anymore because you can do everything else yourself. And so once that's been installed, you would go in here under your tags and you would set up here. I've got it already set up in this little basic setup template that I have running, but I'll do a new one. You just add a new tag. You would give it a name like GA4 setup or something like that. And then you click in here and what you'll get is a list of types of code that you can put on your site. There's a whole bunch of them. Really, like you could put a custom, just copy and paste that code as your custom HTML. But they've also got a ton of other little sort of templates and things that are better to use for certain cases, such as the Google Analytics 4 configuration, which is right here at the top. So I just add that type of a tag. And then you see here, you've got your little space for the measurement ID. And if you remember back here, that was this one. So I take that and paste it in here. And so that's all I need to do. There's tons of other little things you can do here if you want to do some advanced stuff, but that's all you need to do for that part. And then you need a trigger. So so now I've got the tag kind of set up here and I want to tell Tag Manager when should I load this onto the site. So I'd click in the triggers here and you've got, I've got a few custom triggers set up already. But these are the default ones: all pages, consent initialization, and initialization. So these are all, they've got slight differences, but they all basically are saying, load this tag on every page on the site. So I usually use initialization, and then you can save that. So then you've got a new tag here. You see, if I went and submitted this and published it to the website, I'd be all set up and I'd be getting data. So that's how to go about setting up Google Analytics 4 through Tag Manager. And then once you've got all that set up, you can do a ton of other things like make custom events and all that kind of stuff. So you're probably wondering, I think a lot of the, this is all sort of, you set it all up, how do you know for sure if it's actually set up? And that's a lot of what I go through with setting up these tag managers is just testing things to make sure it's all done properly, because there's so many different things that can go wrong. What I use, there's actually 2 essential plugins that you want to use. And if you're just setting up, you can install these through your Chrome browser and then uninstall them when you're done. But I always have them installed. There's one here called the Google Tag Assistant. And there's another one here called the GA debug, or the Google Analytics debugger. These are 2 Chrome extensions. You can just search for them and install them. They're free. They're from Google, and they're meant for this. What I would do here under the Tag Assistant at this point, just to confirm that it's all set up properly, I'd enable that for this web page and refresh my page. And then what that's going to tell me is what tags or what Google tags are loading on this site. I can see here that I've got my Google Tag Manager. Remember that one starts with GTM. So that's loaded on there. And then I've also got 2 other ones, and those are coming through Google Tag Manager. There's my Universal Analytics. It's the old version of Analytics there loading. And I've also got my Google Analytics 4 tag loading on this page. So I know that's all set up. That's all running properly. And so that part is tested there. The other little tester here is you've got, this thing is actually pretty cool. This little Google Analytics debugger. It's super helpful when you're trying to, especially for complicated setups. It's off by default. But what you want to do to actually make sure that all the traffic is coming through your website is just turn that on. And what that does to Google is say, of all the people who are visiting my website right now, pay attention to me. So you can kind of zero in on your own traffic and see what you're doing in real time because this thing's on. And I'm going to show what that looks like here. So I'll just go back to my Google Analytics. Here I'm back, I'm in my admin section here. And well, first I'll show under my reports. There's this real-time section here. I don't think Rob had showed this. I just want to quickly show that you can actually see in real time who's on your website and what they're doing. And I can see that there's one user on there and they've visited one page. It's probably me. Here I am in Courtney. But normally you might have dozens or hundreds of thousands of people on your website at once. So, and you want to kind of see what's going on, like as you're clicking around the site, is everything I set up working? So in that case, because I have my little debug plugin turned on, Google's paying attention to only me. I can go into my debug view and I can see kind of a timeline list of events that have happened on the site. So I can kind of test and make sure, okay, is this working or not? So you can see here at 10:49, there was a session start. That's an event. And I'll talk a bit about events here in a second as well. But so there was a session start, there was a user engagement event, there's a page view event that all happened all at once. And then as I scroll the site, there might be some more events here. I might go to this Google Analytics upgrade page, for example. It doesn't happen exactly at the same time, but and sometimes it takes longer than others. I'm not sure what the difference is, but we should see. I'm doing this live, so I'm crossing my fingers here. I should see, yeah, there it is. So yeah, maybe a 10-second delay there. So there's another user engagement and there's a page view here. And if I can even dig into that page view and say, check the location. Yeah, so I've just viewed this page here. And I can see what the page refers are. I can see a bunch of other things as well. If I were to go, say, to the contact page here and complete one of the conversions items. So one thing that and I'll talk a bit more about conversions in a second as well. But one thing we've said we want to pay attention to is if people are clicking our phone numbers to call us. So we've created a custom event and a custom conversion to say, tell me when somebody clicks on my phone number. So I'm just going to click on that. And in a second here, we're going to see a little engagement here called phone click. And it'll be green because that's we've flagged that as a conversion item. That's kind of one of the goals that we want people to do. So yeah, that little green flag there. So say somebody just did one of your goals. So that's all set up. Another one might be if I submit this form. Once I finish submitting the form, I get another conversion here saying, hey, someone just submitted your form. And these are super important, especially for Google Ads, because you want to send this data back into Google Ads and optimize your ad campaigns so you can tell which campaigns are driving people to take those actions on your site. So yeah, so that's kind of the little debug section here. I am realizing that we're at 10:54 here, so we got 5 minutes left. So we might not get to everything I wanted to cover, but I do just want to quickly talk about events and conversions. So what is an event? I think Rob's already kind of talked about events, but basically any action that somebody takes on your website is an event. And that's different than Google Analytics 3. Analytics 3 or Universal Analytics had events, but they were kind of a subset of a bunch of other things, and they weren't essentially used all the time. Now everything is an event in Google Analytics 4. Like if I scroll the page, that might be an event. If I click a button, if I do whatever I do and it's tracked, any action I take is an event. A page view is an event, and events might have various parameters like the location and the page title and all that kind of stuff. So that's what an event is. And out of the box, Google Analytics comes with a bunch of events like page view and scroll and file download and all that kind of stuff. But that doesn't cover all the things you want to track, like, for example, a phone click or a form submission, specific things. So a lot of what you want to do, especially if you're running ads, is set up custom events so that you can really pay attention to if people are taking the actions you want them to take on your website. And the reason you'd set up custom events is so that what you can do with an event is turn it into a conversion. And all a conversion is an event that's been flagged as a conversion. So if I go into still under my admin here, I can see all the events that have been happening on my website. And in order for an event to show up here, it has to have happened at least once. So I can see there's 21 events that are going on here, and I've flagged one here as a conversion, the schedule appointment. So that's all I do. If I wanted to say flag this one here, I'll actually do it right now. Form submit or generate lead for one, for example. I'll flag that as a conversion as well. Might flag newsletter subscription as a conversion. So these are all things that I'm saying that these are really important events to me. I want people to do this on my website. Then under conversions here, right below it, you can kind of see that list of things that you flagged as conversions. So these are all the things I flagged as conversions. And you can also, a lot of times when you're setting them up, like Rob mentioned, you kind of have to wait for the event to happen and then give it a bit of time and then flag it as a conversion. Or if you know you've set up a custom event called, like, let's say I created one called download ebook. I can just go, I know I've already set up the custom event. I can do download ebook. And it's not necessary to use lowercase and underscores, but Google really wants you to. So that's kind of what they're really pushing you to do is no spaces, no capitals. So just to do it like that, and you can create that conversion there. So I haven't got into how to actually create these custom events yet, and I wanted to show you that in Tag Manager, but we're out of time. So I might see if we can cover that a little bit if people want to stay over, but I might just check in, see if we have any questions, or yeah, we can unmute Rob and see if we've got a couple of questions before I dig into how to create these custom events. And yeah, I can go from there, and yeah, I can stay on for a few minutes after and go cover the creation of custom events if people want me to.
Yeah, I think it'd be great if folks want to message or put in the Q&A anything specific that they want to see. I think probably we'll follow up with some more information, possibly even could do some blog posts on this. And actually, I think the next webinar we probably will do is on the that whole Google ecosystem and those properties and how they relate. Although, yeah, and again, as we mentioned, happy to answer individual questions. And yeah, with that said, are there any specific questions right now?
I do see one in there. What's the best way to filter out internal traffic? And there is actually, again, I've got to kind of always remember where to go and do this, but it is in the settings. Like before in Google Analytics 3, you had to go create a filter, and it was actually, that was pretty fiddly and technical. In Google Analytics 4, I think it's here under your So you got to go in your admin and your data streams, and then here it is right here. So sometimes it's hidden under this show more, show less as well. So I'll just go back and do that again. So you go here under data streams, click here to look at that data stream. Go to your configure tag settings area, and then show all. And then here it is under define internal traffic. And then you can create rules for defining your internal traffic. Most of the time, it's just put your own IP address. You've even got a little like "What's my IP" button there, so you can grab that and throw it in. Give your rules a name, all that kind of stuff. That's how you would do that. Let's see any other questions. If anyone has any more.
Yeah, it looks like there's a couple more in there.
Oh, I see. Let's see. So do you have to keep your UA profiles forever after? No. So the question is, if you have to keep your old Universal Analytics property on there, keep it on until the end of June. And assuming that is when Google disables it, they may hang on, who knows, but right now they're saying they're disabling it in June. After that, there will be no reason to have your UA. It's not going to hurt you, but you can delete it safely after that. So Dale's asked if you can download all your old data, and that unfortunately I don't have the answer to that question. I wish I did. One of those, there's lots of those types. Yeah, I don't think you can. I did look into this a little while ago and I couldn't find a way. I was also looking at ways to try to migrate that data, but it's different data. So like it's structured completely differently. So it's not, at least as far as I can find, I can't find a way to migrate the data or download the data. But if you do find a solution, I'd be interested in knowing for sure.
I'd share too that you can export certain reports, so you can certainly gather snapshots of the reports that you would want to refer back to. But yeah, I haven't the idea of exporting and importing the data, I think actually kind of goes against what they hope to happen. I think they will. I think Google wants a clean slate. And maybe I'll jump in with Darian's question as well, just describing a session. And essentially Google has complicated the language around it by adding tracking of apps as well as websites. They simply changed the term visit into session. So a session is a visit, and it's different from your new user simply because somebody is only a new user on their first visit, and then they might visit multiple times. So there can be multiple sessions, but you're only a new user once. And I think hopefully that kind of explains that.
I see Debbie has a hand up thing there, but I'm not sure how to respond to that.
Oh, let me allow to talk. So Debbie, if you'd like to ask a question, you're just have to unmute and
I'm not sure if maybe you might need to unmute if you're talking, or maybe not. In the meantime, is there any other questions or oh, Debbie says no questions. Yeah, I mean, I have a couple more minutes if anyone wants to show how to create a custom event, or we can yeah, let me know in the comments if you'd like me to show that. Otherwise, yeah, I think we can wrap up.
Yeah, it looks like folks are ready to hop off. So yeah, just like to say thank you for everybody who showed up. And it's funny, I kind of worry that analytics is a bit of a boring topic, but pretty much everybody's stuck around. So I guess there's some concern around it. Just to reiterate, we will have slides and a video of the presentation available that we'll send out next week. And with that said, thanks so much, everybody.